give you a little bit of information about our leader today. Today's book club leader is one of less than 800 certified speaking professionals worldwide and an instructor at Johns Hopkins University's Certificate on Aging program. In addition, she is the author of the Amazon bestseller, Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, which is available as a 99-cent download throughout the month of June. If you have not purchased that, I highly encourage you to do so, as this virtual book club does follow that. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer L. FitzPatrick.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to session 5. Should you live with your loved one who has dementia, or in other words, think really hard before moving in? Now, I know some of you who are joining us today or joining us after we have this program today already live with your loved one who has dementia. Maybe they're your spouse, and so naturally you live together. Or maybe though you've moved your mother in, or you've moved in with your uncle who has dementia. And you think, well, maybe I didn't think too hard about it, but I'm already there. What today we're going to talk about is, if you haven't moved in with your loved one who has dementia already, should you? But we're also going to talk about if you're already living with that person and maybe it's not working out so well, we're going to talk about how to course correct. As you know, throughout Cruising Through Caregiving, we are always talking about the concept that in caregiving, if something's not working for you, your caregiving crew, or for your loved one who has dementia, you always have the opportunity to course correct. And nothing is ever finalized or set in stone. You can always change the way you're doing something. So before we jump in to that part of the program, I want to go ahead and thank our wonderful sponsors, Hilarity for Charity and Oasis Senior Advisors. As always, they are both co-sponsoring this free 15-week virtual book club for dementia caregivers. And we are going to hear a little bit from both the CEO of Oasis Senior Advisors, as well as from one of the representatives from Hilarity for Charity in the middle of our program today. Before we jump into the content, I want to share with you a question I just got a couple of hours ago from a book club participant. It's a little bit off topic, but it's a very important question. So I want to address it before we jump in to the meat and potatoes of our content today. So the caregiving question I most need help with is, how should I, as a caregiving captain, find a navigator, translator, interpreter to help me try to take the best course of action when my 105-year-old dementia-suffering mother asks things like, will you take me home with you tonight? Or when does the trolley leave or the train leave? When can I go home from here? And she's actually at home. So I wanted to address that a little bit today. So for one, there's a YouTube clip of a speech that I gave at an Alzheimer's Association conference recently that answers this question. It gives an example of a family that was struggling with that. And interestingly, the audience jumped in and gave some great ideas of how to manage some of those questions. But as far as a navigator, what I would say to you is, are you in a support group? Are you part of a virtual support group? Are you part of a support group in person? If you're not sure where to go, I know Hilarity for Charity has a support group. You might be able to join one of their support groups, but also Alzheimer's Association in every part of the United States has many, many support groups. So ALZ.org, and most area agency on aging have support groups as well. Other recommendations, just to answer this tough question briefly, we never want to argue. We never want to say, Mom, you're home. That's probably the worst thing that we can do, because in her mind, she's not home. We want to join her mindset. So if she's asking about a train, when's the train coming to get me? Join her. Talk to her. Oh, what kind of train are you waiting for? What train are you thinking of getting on? Sometimes when we join them, you're going to hear a little bit more about what's going on in their mind. Even though the person is confused, they have thoughts that are going on in their mind, and that can give you some insight. Also, you may want to consider simply redirecting your loved one, maybe getting them engaged in music or an old movie, or maybe giving them a hand massage or taking a walk. So when you're dealing with questions that you find really tough or stressful to answer, those are some quick ideas. It's never easy, and we all make mistakes with dementia communication. We all do. I don't care how many people you've worked with who have dementia, how many loved ones you've cared for. We all make mistakes, but just know you always have another chance to do better the next time you communicate with your loved one. But I would say your navigator, consider us here at the Virtual Support Group for Dementia Caregivers to be a navigator. Consider Polarity for Charity, OASIS, a support group, maybe work with a care manager. But also, if you work with a therapist or a counselor who understands dementia. Now, I'm a clinical social worker, and I think everybody could benefit from therapy at one point or another. But some of you might even find a navigator in a spiritual advisor, somebody from your church, your synagogue, your temple. But a navigator often needs to be somebody that really does understand what you're going through with dementia. So I hope that answers the question that came in a couple of hours ago. And again, the YouTube clip below will definitely help you as well. So last week, we discussed how the entire caregiving crew is important. And I want to share this photograph of my family, and this isn't even all of us. This is a good number of us, but this was the last, my family, we have St. FitzPatrick's Day in our family, and in the middle with the green blazer with the gray hair, that's my grandma. And every single person in this picture was a participant in caregiving for her when she needed care, and many more who were not in this picture. So I want everybody to know that last week we discussed the concept of the whole caregiver crew being important. And interestingly, another comment came in today, early this morning, and I need to address something that happened last week so we can talk about this week. So we're going to build upon last week again because we did have an outstanding comment. And the comment was specifically about last week in chapter 4. And it was from a book club participant that says, "This is all very well and good from a book situation. Come and live with this situation 24/7, years at a time. You only live day to day to exist. Sometimes it's hour to hour." And what I would say to that book club participant, obviously, at least from what I'm hearing in this comment, I did write back to her to get clarification, but I didn't hear back. And maybe if you're on this program live right now, you might write in if you feel comfortable. But what I'm getting from this is that you feel like the whole caregiving crew maybe can't be important because you're just trying to live day to day. And that, to me, means that you really, really need to think about where do you want to course correct? Because if this is truly how you feel, if it's 24/7, if you are only living day to day or hour to hour, it's time to really think about course correcting. What do you need to change? Because it sounds like you as the captain are not feeling as important as the person who has dementia. So it seems like you're going through a really tough time. I did write you back, and you're very welcome to elaborate or ask additional questions. But hopefully some of the content for today about living together will address some of this. Because when you do feel like this is a sign that you probably do need to make a course correction. So right now, what I would like to ask, we have the poll. I want to ask, are you living with someone who has dementia? So for those of you who are on live, and of course, those of you who are joining us from a future, you're viewing this in the future, I want you to take a moment and just tell us, are you living currently with someone that you love who has dementia? So take a moment and let's answer that poll. Try to see where we are today. Okay, so 17% yes and 83% no. Okay, so for those of you who are currently living with your loved one with dementia, we're going to go through if it's working or if it's not working, how do you handle that? For those of you who aren't, if you have a loved one who has dementia and you're thinking about moving your loved one in, this is absolutely for you. So you can think, if you're thinking of moving in with them, you're thinking maybe they need to move into your home. A lot of what we're going to cover is maybe how do you make that decision? Because moving a new person into your home, whether it's, if you have maybe a college student that's rebounding for the summer, their home, or you have maybe an adult child who's moving home for a period of time, that's a lot. That's having another person move into your house. If you take on a roommate or a housemate, that's a lot. Or even just a parent or an uncle or aunt who doesn't have dementia. Bringing another person into your home is a lot, but it's a big undertaking when somebody has dementia. So most of you are at this point are not. So what I want to say to those of you who are living with your loved one who has dementia, the 17% of you that are right now living with your loved one who has dementia, if your feet are planted solidly on the ground and you feel like it's working out and you're not feeling like you're neglecting yourself and you're feeling like things are going well and your loved one, you feel like he or she is getting great care, wonderful. I am not trying to talk anybody out of taking care of their loved one at home. If it's working for you, it's working for your spouse, it's working for your kids, it's working for, say, your aunt, your grandparent, your mom who lives with you, perfect, wonderful. In some cases, it works out beautifully. So if you've got your feet planted solidly on the ground and it's great, just all good. However, what I want you to keep an eye out for is, do you need to course correct in the future? Maybe it's going well today, but in 3 months, in 6 months, in 2 years, might you need to course correct? So just always know if it stops working out great, that you might need to course correct. So somebody did just write in, so I want to just see what the comment is. Oh, okay, Darlene's just sharing to remind everybody, feel free to write in if they would like to ask a question or share a comment. Thanks, Darlene. So for those of us who technology is great when it works. Here we go. For those of us who feel it is working out great, I'm wondering if these are some of the pros that you're feeling. So you might feel, if you feel like it's going well and you have your feet solidly planted on the ground, you might feel really in control of the caregiving situation. You know where your loved one is, you know who's taking care of her, you're with her a lot. So that, a lot of people describe that as a pro. Another pro is a lot of people feel like they want to feel like they've done everything possible for their loved one who has dementia. Often others, if you think of a pro that you feel like is a pro for you with your loved one with dementia living with you, feel free to write that in at any point. Another pro can be you just want as much time as possible with your loved one who has dementia. You want to spend as much time as you possibly can. Another pro. Maybe you have kids at home. Maybe you have kids that are in 6th grade and 8th grade, and they're learning from the situation. They're spending time with their grandmother or their great-grandmother, and they're learning about caregiving, and they're learning about what it's like to help an older loved one that's having some health problems. Maybe it's enhancing that relationship. Maybe your loved one is in the early stages still, and they get along great with your kids, and your kids enjoy having them around. So there can absolutely be some pros to living with your loved one who has dementia. A lot of people move their loved one in also because they're trying to avoid feeling bad or guilty. So if they live somewhere else, like if they live with my sister or if they were in assisted living, I would feel bad or I'd feel guilty. So a lot of people will say, well, that's a pro. That's one of the pros of having my grandparent live with me. You feel good. A lot of people, because of their culture or because of their value system or sometimes because of their religious beliefs, feel that they're honoring the culture, the value, the religious beliefs. So they feel like that's a good thing. It's a good feeling, and that's another grow. So living together can work out beautifully. It can be a beautiful gift that you give that person, and that you're learning a lot. So it can be very, very nice for many families. But for some families, it's not as good of a situation. And we're going to talk about the case I shared in Cruising Through Caregiving in this chapter 5 about Julio. So let's talk a little bit about Julio. So if you've read Cruising Through Caregiving, you probably remember this case. So Julio had an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. He recently, his lady friend, his longtime lady friend, recently passed away, and they had been living together. And so Julio now lives alone, and his symptoms to his family seem to be worse now that his lady friend has passed away. There's a lot of reasons why that might be. And so the adult son becomes concerned because finding out that Julio's left the stove on. And he finds out that Julio's wandering. In fact, he thought that his neighbor's home was his home. He went out to get the mail and came back and tried to get into his neighbor's house rather than his own home. And there was a lot of confusion. There's memory issues, so a lot of problems. And so it comes to the family's attention that Julio just doesn't seem safe anymore by himself. And gosh, his symptoms really seem more pronounced. What should we do? So Julio and Julio's son and daughter-in-law are thinking, should I move dad into our house? And so what I want everybody to do is tell me what you think. You probably, if you've read the book, you know what my thoughts are on this. But if is moving Julio into his son and daughter-in-law's home the best decision? Take a moment and answer that poll question. Yes, no, maybe. Yeah, so I got interesting. So 17% of you earlier said that you were living with your loved one who has dementia, and 83% said you were not. So I'm curious if those of you who said you were living with your loved one who has dementia are the ones that said don't move Julio in. 83% of you said maybe, and I think it's maybe. I definitely think it's maybe. Sometimes it is a good decision. Sometimes it's not. But for Julio and his son and daughter-in-law and their kids, it really wasn't a great decision. So why do you suppose it really didn't work out so well for the family here? There were a few reasons that it was not the best decision. For one, Julio, the son and the daughter-in-law actually had jobs. So in this case, Julio was moved into his son and daughter-in-law's home, and the son and daughter-in-law have jobs. And so they have to commute to work. They have to go to work and be at work. And they have kids. They have responsibilities involving the kids. But in the case of Julio, the son and daughter-in-law felt like, okay, this makes sense. This is what we're going to do. And they realized they weren't actually spending that much time with him, because it's not as though one of them was home all day. Now, I'm not saying that Julio's son and daughter-in-law should quit their jobs. I'm not saying that. In fact, next week, we're going to have Amy Goyer on from AARP, who is an expert in caregiving and career. So she's going to give us some really great insights about that. But the issue here was that Julio was still getting into the same kind of trouble. When he was living alone, he was walking out of his son and daughter-in-law's house. He was leaving the stove on at their house. Just because he lived with them and they slept in the same house at night and they had some meals together and they were together more on the weekend, it didn't necessarily make Julio safer. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of families over the years who think, well, if he's in my house, then it's less problems are going to happen. And sometimes that's not necessarily the case. even if, say, Julio's son or daughter-in-law were there 24 hours a day, they have to go to the bathroom, they have to take showers, they're going to turn their head to make a cup of coffee, and could Julio walk out the door? This kind of thing happens all the time. So it's not to say that it's a bad decision, but just moving him in wasn't solving all of the problems that were going on with Julio's case. So I think more needed to be done. If moving Julio in was a fine option, but that's not enough to make the situation better for Julio or for the family. It was creating a lot of stress for this family. And excuse me, as always, just please keep in mind that all the case examples in Cruising Through Caregiving, excuse me, and all of the examples that we share in book club are all composites, and identifying characteristics have always been changed. So let's talk about some of the cons of living together. So you move your loved one in. For those of you who said, no, don't move Julio in, let's talk about some of the cons. 17% of you said don't do that. So keep in mind, so let's say the son who moves him in, everybody else in the caregiving crew, so let's say the son, I believe the son's name in the book is Juan. Juan and his wife move Julio in. Well, now Juan's brother and sister think, Juan's got it. Juan's got everything. I don't really need to do that much anymore because he's living with my brother. And so sometimes that shift does occur, that everybody else who is in the caregiving crew thinks, you got this, you're in it. And it's really important for the caregiving captain, if the person's living with you, you're probably the captain, you got to keep letting the other crew members know, I still need your help. So that can sometimes be a con of living together. A lot of times the caregiver doesn't realize that they're sort of in the hot seat. Everyone in the family and friend network thinking you're going to do everything. Another con, for example, if it's not your spouse or partner. So obviously, if it's your husband, your wife, your longtime partner, and they have Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, and especially in the early stages, they're living with you. You've been living together for 20, 30, 50 years. This doesn't apply to you, but let's say you want to bring Aunt Sue in to move in with you. Well, does everybody have an extra linen closet like this in this bathroom? Not necessarily. There can be simply logistics of space, like where will this person sleep? If you've got teenage daughters who take forever to get ready in the morning for high school and get their hair done and put their makeup on, is that going to be a problem if they have to share the bathroom with their Aunt Sue? So those are sorts of things that you might want to think about. Are they going to be a cons? I think a lot of times people make an emotional decision about moving in the loved one who has dementia. Again, a non-spouse or partner. So I've worked with so many people over the years who moving a parent or a grandparent or someone else in puts tremendous strain on a marriage or relationship. It really needs to be a choice that you make together as partners. So if you have a spouse or a partner who you live with and you share a life with, thinking of bringing one of your parents or another older loved one with dementia into the home, it really needs to be a conversation that you have together and think about what kind of stress, is there going to be stress on our relationship? Now, I think this is a little different than if you have a loved one who doesn't have dementia, like say you want to move your mom in and your husband has never gotten along with your mother and your mother doesn't have dementia, that might be a no-brainer. It's probably going to put tremendous stress on the marriage. But as many of us know, when you have a loved one who has dementia, a lot of times we see personality changes. And so sometimes, even though maybe your husband and your mom never really got along, maybe mom is actually a little bit different and she's not rubbing your husband the wrong way as much now that she has these dementia symptoms. She has some personality changes which can happen. So you might think, well, all right, it might work, but you also have the stressors of all that comes along with dementia caregiving. And it's, of course, not just mom forgets, what day of the week it is. But it gets to the point, like as the disease progresses, mom forgets how to put on her shoes. Mom forgets how to pick up a fork. all of those issues. Mom is incontinent now. She needs Depends. So those are the types of stressors. Even if you have a really solid marriage, this can really put a strain. So it can be a con for a lot of families. Another one is you're on all the time. You're the it person. If that person lives with you and they fall, or they start having more behavioral issues, or you're worried there's a medicine side effect, you're probably in the hot seat most of the time. And again, unless you make a true effort to get the rest of the caregiving crew participating, this is really definitely an issue. So you're probably going to be the one that's rushing them to the emergency department in the middle of the night if there's a problem, or if they wander out of your front door, you're going to be the one calling the police. So you're going to be the one that's on all the time. Whereas if your loved one was in senior living, if your loved one lived with another family member, you wouldn't be the one in the hot seat all of the time. Another possible con, there's a lot of burnout. If the person lives with you and you don't have a crew, especially if you don't have a crew, the possibility of you burning out is very strong. The other one that a lot of families don't ever really think too hard about is your loved one doesn't get what he or she needs. So let me talk to you a little bit about this. So we talked about the example of Julio. Julio wasn't getting what he needs. He wasn't being safe at home anymore. He was still able to wander out of the house, still able to leave the stove on, still able to light a match and have the fire alarm go off. I mean, there were still a lot of issues. So he wasn't truly getting what he needs simply because they moved in. But also think about if they live with you and and I want to go back to the person that sent the note early this morning. I want to go back to this. It made me think this is all very well and good from a book situation. Come live with it 24/7, years at a time. You only live day to day. Sometimes it's an hour. If you're living with your loved one and this is how you feel, you're probably, like we said, burnt out. And is your loved one really getting what he or she needs? Is your loved one? So maybe if they're really only seeing you, if you're the only one with them 24/7, let's say you don't leave your house. Let's say you don't have a job. Let's say you don't do anything outside of taking care of your loved one. Isn't that tough on your loved one? You're probably getting tired of seeing your loved one. You're exhausted. You're burnt out. But guess what? They're probably tired of seeing just you too. They would probably love to see other people, or hear from other people, or have some stimulation. What we find a lot of times when people live at home in the private home, especially in the mid and late stages, the person is sitting in that rocking chair, or they are on that couch and they are dozing all day or watching TV all day. They're not stimulated. Whereas if unless the caregiver is really making an effort to get them out of the house every day, or take them for walks, or put on music and sing with them, or give them massages, or these types of things, when you're in a private home, especially if it's just one or two caregivers, often they're not getting stimulation, and it can make behavioral issues worse. If your loved one is dozing all day in front of the television, this is not a good situation for them. They're probably napping and they're resting too much. They're not getting enough exercise. And guess when they're wandering? The middle of the night when you're trying to sleep. So your loved one often isn't necessarily getting what he or she needs, especially if you're trying to do it all by yourself. So it's not just about you. You have to consider, can living together really work? Is it really going to work not just for you, your spouse, your kids, but also the person that has dementia? Will it work for them? So feel free to write any comments or questions in the chat section if you're joining us live today. But I'm going to take a moment again to thank our sponsors, Hilarity for Charity and Oasis Senior Advisors, two lovely organizations who are co-sponsoring the virtual book club for dementia caregivers, our 15-week complimentary program for dementia caregivers. So first, we're going to hear a little bit from Tim Ivankovich, who is the CEO of Oasis Senior Advisors. So Tim, I'm going to ask you to share your screen and join us. And And Tim, tell us a little bit about what Oasis Senior Advisors can do to help if someone finds themselves thinking, I don't know that I should be living with my loved one anymore, or they should be living with me.
Yeah, you bring up some great topics here today, Jen. And first of all, thank you for letting me be a part of this and our partnership with you and with Hilarity for Charity. Fantastic, and we're excited to participate. But to your point, we deal with families every day where that decision making of, gosh, do we move them into a nice memory care facility or community, or do we stay at home? And I can tell you firsthand on the multiple times the difference of when they finally make that decision to move into a memory care community and the release of pressure and stress on the family and the whole family dynamic and what it does to marriages and things like that. It can be very, very difficult to make that change, but 99.9% of the time, it is the best thing for the senior and especially for the family. So when that happens, when you're in that conundrum of, is it time? Should we, make the change into memory care or assisted living? The best thing you can do is just have a conversation with us. We see cases day after day after day and can make, just like you have, recommendations of, is it time? What is the senior doing that is making life more and more difficult and more challenging? And so many times when we see that transition into memory care and or assisted living, the transformation of the senior, of how much happier they can be, and the activities, and sometimes it can be truly life-changing for them, where all the time the family thinks they're doing the best thing for them, keeping them at home, when in essence, being home by themselves or just with one person, they don't have that interaction with multiple people, and they do really thrive in some of those situations.
Yeah, it really is amazing, because sometimes people feel like the worst thing they could ever do is move them out of home. And again, there's not one way of being a good caregiver. There's lots of ways to be a good caregiver, but some people, it's just physically laborious. Like, it's too hard to, in the later stages, lift that person or help them in the bathroom, or I think that sneaks up, especially as the person moves out of the mid stages into the late stages, the labor intensive issues that occur. And I think, but also, like, with wandering, and that's tough. And even when people say, well, I'm there all the time, are you really? Like, do you ever use the restroom yourself?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So tell us, how do we get in touch with Oasis Senior Advisors, and when's a good time to get in touch with them if you think that you might need help? And I do want to remind everybody that Oasis Senior Advisors is a complimentary service to families and caregivers and older persons. So oasissenior-advisors.com. But when's a good time to get in touch with an Oasis Senior Advisor?
Well, I think from what we're hearing today, I think people realize that the sooner the better. Because again, our service doesn't cost you anything to have that conversation, to get some suggestions or some thoughts. And I guess, again, with us, we have real life experiences that we glean from to help those families make that final decision. So sooner rather than later. And yes, we're oasissenior-advisors.com and easy to reach out to. I've got franchisees all over the country, over 80 of them now. So would be happy to help in any capacity we could.
Thank you so much, Tim. And we really, really appreciate that you're so supportive of the Virtual Book Club for Dementia Caregivers. And, so many of your franchises have been so supportive of this venture as well. So thank you very much to Oasis Senior Advisors, oasissenior-advisors.com. So now I'm going to invite our next, our only other sponsor, Hilarity for Charity. So this is Jojo Drake, and Jojo is the Communications and Program Manager with Hilarity for Charity, hilarityforcharity.org. So Jojo, tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives that are going on with Hilarity for Charity right now.
Yeah, hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Jen, for everything that you do for helping all the caregivers out there and caring for them and helping them cruise more smoothly through their caregiving experience. So HFC, as you guys know, for the caregiver and caring for been impacted yet, but want to save their brains from the devastation of the disease. And on the note of just supporting anyone who's been impacted, we have found that creating a community and sharing our stories can be really integral through getting through what is a really harrowing experience. I mean, it's not an easy disease. Lauren really found how cathartic it was to
It looks like we're losing JoJo. I'm not sure. I think we lost JoJo. So I'm going to see if we can, if JoJo, if you're able to jump back in, feel free to come back in. But I know what JoJo wanted to talk a little bit to you about today was Lauren Miller-Rogan, who JoJo just started to talk about, sharing stories, one of the founders of Polarity for Charity, sharing stories and sharing so people don't feel alone. And so the link here to share your story, if you're compelled to do so, they would love to share your story. And it's hilarityforcharity.org /stories/ pardon me, and feel free to send in your story. And just like with a support group, you know that it will help other people to know that they're not alone. It can be a very isolating disease. So Lauren, if you are able to get back in, we would love to have you come on in. We'll make some time for you because I know you weren't finished with what you wanted to say. But Lauren, if you want to chat at the participants as well, you're very welcome to do that too. But again, thank you so much to Hilarity for Charity. And here's Lauren again, JoJo again.
Hey guys, so sorry. The technology, I don't know what's going on. Zoom just kicked me off, but I'm back and I'm excited to tell you guys more. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear.
I'm going to keep going here then. So I was just getting ready to tell you guys about our initiative to create community, create solidarity, and have you guys have a platform through which you can share your own stories. So one of my favorite quotes from Lauren about this is, sharing our personal stories isn't easy, but it reminds us that we are not alone. So let's talk about it. Let's share our stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you guys want to share that story, I will be in a moment including that link to do that in the chat. And then I just want to tell you an example of one of those stories we've received. I think it's one of a really beautiful one, but I'll keep it short so we can keep going through our book club session. This was from Jen DiVittorio. She's of North Carolina. And her mother passed away from Alzheimer's. Her favorite recent memory of her mom was 2 years ago. She was new to memory care, so she made the choice to not leave her, to not move in with her mother and move her mother into her home. She put her in memory care because that was best for her and her family, and I think that ties well to today's topic. And they decided to host her son's bar mitzvah a full 2 years early. They did it right inside the assisted living facility, and they wanted to do it so she could attend it while still knowing her grandson. She was ecstatic the entire day and got a little confused, and at one point thought it was Jen, her daughter's wedding. But it was a goodbye of sorts. Over 100 people flew in support and love of her family. So lots of, there's the captains and then all the other caregivers, right, as we've been talking about in our book. So all these other people came in and showed support. And Alzheimer's has really just changed her life profoundly. Every milestone was and still is a new death, but she, and while the grief of it can be extraordinary, she has found support in her family and friends and her loved ones. And her greatest advice for people going through this is to educate themselves, which is what you guys are doing now. And she says to ask for help, to attempt to be patient with your loved one and with yourself, and to forgive yourself even when it seems like you can't. You're gonna make mistakes. And I know it's easier said than done. I personally haven't been a caregiver, so I don't want to preach to the choir in any way. These are her words. But she even says to buy your loved one a companion cat. That may not work for everyone, but it worked for her. And she just can't wait until there's a world where there isn't Alzheimer's, and she understands this is a disease that doesn't discriminate. It needs attention and it needs a cure, and we all need to fight. And I think part of doing that is sharing our stories. So Thanks, Jen.
Thank you so much, Jojo. What a beautiful story from Jen in North Carolina. Thank you, Jen, for sharing that. And, you know, really, every story is unique. So wherever you want to share your stories, I mean, please send them to Hilarity for Charity. They're trying to connect everybody with this, that's going through these experiences and these challenges. But also just quickly want to remind everybody that Hilarity for Charity does have respite grants that you can apply for at hilarityforcharity.org. And also in the fall, they're going to be doing a Healthy Brain Initiative, which we'll be hearing more about in upcoming sessions. So thank you again, JoJo, and Hilarity for Charity for being partners with us on this. Have you gone overboard? Do you need to course correct? So we're at the point in the book club where we need to think, have we gone overboard? Do we need to change? If we're living with our loved one and it's not working out, do we want to make a change? Do we want to make a course correction? Do we want to make an adjustment? So is an adjustment needed? So maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, things are going pretty well, but they're not going perfectly. I am starting to feel burnout, or I'm starting to feel like I can't do it all, or my mom's wandering because I do need to work. Well, should you add some home care? And this might be that you might want to apply for the grant that Hilarity for Charity offers, the respite relief. So home care is definitely an option. And I just want to mention, JoJo just put in the chat section also the link. It was on that page, the last page, but also it's in the chat section if you'd like to cut and paste from there. So should you add home care, whether you look at you applying for a grant or contacting a home care agency, we're going to have Lakeland Hogan from Home Instead in a couple of weeks, actually in July. She is the partner who administers the home care grants through Hilarity for Charity. Another option, if you want to make an adjustment, is considering adult day. Adult daycare, in my opinion, is some of the best bargain that you can possibly get in older adult care and dementia care. The database where you can find adult day programs is nadsa.org/locator/. And it is a program where you can send your loved one. Often they provide transportation, they provide meals for the day. So if maybe you work and you want your loved one to go there 5 days a week, I can tell you it's going to be an adjustment if they're used to sitting on the couch all day and watching TV, but they're going to have stimulation. They're going to be around professionals. They're going to have typically healthy meals. Some of them are able to help do medication management. So this is a bargain. This is one of the best bargains out there. So if you're trying to stretch your dollars, adult day can be a really good option for you. And I wish that there were more of them, but this is something you can consider. I still want to keep my mom home, still want to keep my husband at home, but let's do adult day. Let's look into it. Take a tour of an adult day. And again, you want to do this if you're starting to feel like, I don't know if I can do this forever where my mom is at home. Start looking, call, ask the questions, and tour, look at places. The other option is do the MET exercise on page 148 of Cruising Through Caregiving. I think we talked about it in the first book club session. It's the MET exercise for how do you find free help within your friend, family, church, synagogue, temple, network, neighborhood. How do you find free and low-cost help that supports you or supports your loved one? So maybe you can still keep your mom home, but you're going to have to get a commitment from your niece that she's going to come over every Wednesday night so you can go out with your friends. So do you need to have an adjustment? Is it time to just say, yes, I'm still committed to keeping my loved one at home. It's working, but I need to make some tweaks. Or is it time to stop living together? Are you burnt out? Are you exhausted? Do you feel like you're hitting what I call martyr syndrome, which we're going to do a whole book club session on martyr syndrome? So is it time to move? Moving is not a failure. Moving is not a failure. I want to keep saying it. Moving is not a failure. Now, many years ago, Nancy Reagan, First Lady Nancy Reagan, took care of President Reagan. And she did a lot of great things for the Alzheimer's movement. She got us the national attention for Alzheimer's, but she was interviewed many times, and she shared that she would never move President Reagan out of their Bel Air home. And I write about this in Cruising Through Caregiving. And she had some things that most of us don't have, though. And I'm not talking even about money. So, the Reagans were quite wealthy and they could afford to have lots of services, lots of help. But, if President Reagan wandered, I'm guessing it's the Secret Service who stopped him. They had resources that most of us can't imagine. And I still wonder, was it absolutely the right thing for him? Maybe it was. Maybe it was the right thing for them and their family. But did he get all the stimulation that he needed, like activity-wise? Did he see enough different people? And again, every caregiver has to make that choice. What's best for you? What's best for your loved one? What's best for your caregiving crew? But I know that Mrs. Reagan talked a lot about how she would never move her president, her husband, the president. But for a lot of us, it's just not an option. She had so much help in the home that most of us couldn't afford, most of us couldn't have indefinitely. And just know that if you do choose to move your loved one at some point, especially if they're wandering, they're leaving the stove on, maybe there's some behavioral issues that are really challenging, or maybe it's just that you're running out of your patience answering questions over and over again. And you just are tired, you can't do it anymore. There's no shame in moving. Never forget that. And so this is where senior living options, nursing home options are out there. Oasis Senior Advisors is a complimentary free program that you can contact if you want to check them out and see if they can help you at some point, if this is a good idea. If you want to explore the idea of maybe staying home is not going to be the best thing for us indefinitely. The physical labor, especially in the late stages, bathing, making sure that the person doesn't get a bed sore, taking care of that person when they, when their depends are soiled, it's very tough. Most families cannot do it at the very end. It's just too much. So don't think that there's shame if you do choose at some point that your loved one has to move. Again, I'm not telling you have to. There's a million ways to be a good caregiver. Okay. So there's not just one way to be a good caregiver. There's many ways. So let's say you decide we're going to make an adjustment. We're going to send Aunt Sally to adult day. Or you know what? Mom needs to move. It's just not working. We found a memory care community, or we found an assisted living with a memory care component, and we really like it, and she's going to move. Should we discuss it with mom or grandpa or Uncle Joe, the person who has dementia? Do you discuss it with them? What do you think? Yes? No? Maybe? See what everybody has to say. Wow, we're all over the place today. Okay, so yes, 38%, no, 13%, maybe 50%. Okay, so here's my opinion on this. And I believe that you should talk to the healthcare professionals who know your loved ones. So the doctor, if you have social workers or care managers or nurses that are helping you choose what's going on with your loved one. It's interesting. I believe the answer is maybe. So if the person's in the early stages and you decide, that you just can't, they've had some moments where they, let's say that they've walked out of the house or they've driven the car away and there was a silver alert and they're still in the early stages. You can probably have a conversation with them because a lot of the moments that they're having in their brain are just like you and I. So early stages, you can talk to them, but know that they might not remember that you said, listen, we're going to bring some help into the home. If they're in the mid stages, I would say that you can try it. You might want to have one conversation with them. Mom, you're going to be moving, or Mom, we're going to bring some help into the home. But know that even if you have that conversation, it's likely that they're going to forget. They're going to ask you about it over and over again, or it might just not compute. In the late stages, the person often is not really able to be verbal anymore, and may not understand what you're saying. So you can try to have a conversation if you're bringing in home care, if you're moving them, if you're going to do adult day, or you're bringing other family and friends in to share the caregiving duties. But I want you to keep your expectations really, not that they're going to say, sure, great, I'd love to move. Most of the time, that is not going to happen. Most of the time, you're going to have an argument. I don't know what you mean. Nothing's wrong with my brain. Nothing's wrong with my memory. Sometimes, Lori LeBay was on a couple of weeks ago, and she shared that her mother had a moment of clarity and said she wanted to move. I can tell you that I've never seen that happen, except I've heard it from Lori, and I saw it in the movie Away From Her with Gordon Pinsent and Julie Christie. I'm not saying it can't happen. It happened to Lori LeBay. But in a lot of cases, the person either it can be in denial or they're going to forget that they have a diagnosis. So if you're going to make a change, there's a lot of different ways to make that adjustment. For one, work with the senior living community. If they are good professionals, if they have good experience, they're going to be able to help you figure out a way to make the transition. But there's this really, to me, as like so much in dementia care, is a maybe. Maybe you should discuss it with them. But just know that it's not going to be a discussion like you and I would have, where we can reason and go back and forth. Maybe that person having a moment of clarity or a day of clarity, but just keep your expectations to remember that their brain is not working like yours if you do choose to talk about it and have these discussions. Feel free to write into the chat box if you have any comments or questions. And again, if you have any questions about what we just talked about, it's tough because a lot of us feel like we should be discussing it. You know what? I can't just move Mom. I can't just bring in a stranger to help out with her care without discussing it with her. A lot of times people will, if they bring a home care aide in, they'll position it as it's a friend that's visiting, or they might position it as somebody that's going to help us around the house. If they have tried to have that conversation and the person says, I don't need help, you don't need to hire somebody for me, or don't spend your money on help, I'm just fine. So I think there's a lot of ways to handle it, and you have to know your loved one, but also talk to objective people in your life. If you're working with an Oasis senior advisor, talk to them. If you're working with a care manager or a doctor or somebody, a spiritual advisor who knows your loved one and understands where they are with their disease process, get some weigh-in from other people as well. You want to be careful about making that decision in a vacuum because it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety for the person who has dementia. Once again, I want to say thank you so much to our fantastic sponsors, Hilarity for Charity, hilarityforcharity.org, and Oasis Senior Advisors, oasissenior-advisors.com. It really was a pleasure to be here with all of you today and talk about should we move our loved one in, and if we are living with them, is it a good idea to continue? And again, there's no right answer, but hopefully today's program helped guide you to figuring out what makes sense for you, your loved one, and the whole caregiving crew. I want to thank you all so much. And again, while you don't need a copy of Cruising Through Caregiving to enjoy the book club or participate in the book club, know that it is 99 cents on Kindle for Amazon. It was a deal of the month for Kindle for Amazon. and you can get it there for 99 cents. And also you can get it out of your most local libraries are carrying it. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and we look forward to welcoming you back next week, where we will welcome Amy Goyer from AARP to talk about work, career, and caregiving. Thanks so much.